Now, when we have TCP IP and we want to communicate across the globe, how would we identify devices on the internet or even on the intranet? Because the devices don't know us. They are not going to use our usernames and passwords to communicate with each other. But when I want to connect to a website or a device, how do I identify it on the intranet or the internet? I obviously use IP addresses. Now, IP addresses are nothing but the internet protocol addresses, which are 32-bit addresses, which look exactly like the one shown on your screen, 172.16.254.1. Now, there is a lot of classification of IP addresses, and some of these IP addresses work on the internet. Some of them are supposed to work on private LANs, but we'll reserve that for a later topic. Then, the second way that we are identified on the internet or the intranet are with MAC addresses. So, media access controls or MAC addresses are hard-coded addresses that are given to our network interface cards. These cannot be modified physically at any point in time. However, there are techniques to spoof MAC addresses, which we can then obfuscate our existing address and give us a new one. That would again be discussed in a later lecture. A router. We've been talking about routers and switches. A router is nothing but a device that passes packets back and forth across networks. It routes the data in the appropriate path. So it is an intelligent device. It can understand IP addresses and MAC addresses. It can identify different paths of reaching a particular network. For example, if I'm sitting in India and I want to communicate across the world to America, there would be a specific path that needs to be followed for my data packet to reach the other side of the world. It is the routers that would map this path, store it in their cache. So when I try to connect to that server, they would retrieve it from the cache and send the packet across the globe. So the home router that we use at home on Wi-Fi is our default gateway to connect to the internet, and thus it allows our internal devices to communicate with each other using internal IP addresses. And when we want to go to the internet, it will then route the traffic on the internet and send the packet to other servers that we want to communicate. With. Now, what is a domain? A domain is referred to as a group of computers and other devices that are interconnected and treated as a whole. Now, a domain is used by an organization. So, let's say if I am XYZ, XYZ being the name of the organization, and I want to create a domain which will allow me to create a group of interconnected computers for my employees to interconnect with each other and send and manage data. I'm going to create a domain for my organization and attach all the devices, create users and interconnect them using a domain. So this is where you're going to have a centralized approach of a server-client relationship, where you're going to have a main domain and you're going to have devices connected to the domain. Now, when we go onto the internet, the domain name is nothing but the base part of a website name. So when you say google.com and you type it in your browser, you're taken to the web page called google.com, which is the search engine that you're connected. But for Google, the organization, at the other end, they would have a data center over there which would have all that relevant data which allows you to search through that information. So for them, the domain would be the internal part where they have got this cluster of servers creating a data center where all that information is stored. But for us as consumers, a website called google.com would be a domain for us to visit that particular website and consume the services that they're offering on the internet.